Hello, this is the introductory video to the PowerPoint, which will be separate. Make sure you watch both of them on Chapter 5, Adapting to Your Audience. And I just wanted to say a few things before, for as way of introduction before you actually watch the PowerPoint. Uh, this chapter is certainly very important, and it speaks specifically to my rule number 2, which is, do I hear it? Do I hear anybody saying? It is never assume anything. And once again, uh, you might be a little confused by that rule. You're not supposed to assume your audience knows nothing, that they're just dumb, and you have to explain everything in detail to them. No, of course not. That would potentially even be insulting to your audience. But it speaks to issues of commonality, demographics, and all kinds of things, belief systems. And you need to have some kind of idea before you start making a presentation of what these commonalities are of your audience. You're thinking, well, how am I supposed to know that? We'll talk about that. So here's an example. You know I like jokes. All right. And you also know that I've whined and complained about all my eye surgery. Yeah, I've had two. I have one more coming up later in October. I hope that settles it. My eye doctor said, because I can't see very well out of my right eye, wear a patch over your right eye. I thought, well, if I'm going to wear a patch, it's got to be the right patch. Arr! All right, there be two pirates in a boat, little small boat tossing around on the ocean. There had been a fearsome battle, and they were the only two left. It had been 3 days, and they had no fresh water left. And one of the pirates looked over, and he saw a brass lamp floating in the ocean. And he reached over and he plucked it out of the water. And the other pirate looked at him and he said, "Why not?" And so the first pirate with the lamp rubs it real hard, and poof, a genie appears. But the genie's in a bad mood. He said, "Look, I know what you want, but today you get one wish and that's it, and I'm out of here. I have other things to do." And so the first thing that pops into this pirate's mind is something to drink. He says, "Arr, I wish that the entire ocean would be made of the best rum I ever tasted." Pirate and the genie said, "Great," and poof, he disappeared into the lamp. The two pirates looked at each other and they found a couple of little cups in the boat. They scooped up some of the water, or the ocean, and they took a sip and they said, "Arr, that be mighty fine rum, best rum I've ever had." And they tasted a little bit more, and the pirate in the back of the little boat was kind of looking at the other pirate, sort of angry. And the first pirate said, "What?" He said, "Well, you know what this means now, matey." And the first pirate says, I don't know. What does it mean?" "It means we're going to have to pee in the boat." Arr, 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 arr. Okay, anyway. Not sure which is better, the patch or my glasses. So, yeah, jokes are always fun. And the appropriate joke for an audience can add a lot of life to your speech. But let me tell you another joke. All right. You're thinking, "Oh God, is he ever going to stop?" No, I'm not. Okay. Let me tell you another joke. And this one is very specific to chapter 5. No, adapting to your audience. All right. So there's this bar. Must be the bar at the end of the universe. But anyway, there's this bar. And in walks into the bar Rene Descartes, the philosopher. And he walks up to the bar, and the bartender says, "Well, I think I know you. Aren't you that famous French philosopher, Descartes?" And Rene Descartes says, "Oui, monsieur, that is me." And the bartender said, "Well, it's a real honor to have you in our bar. What can I get you?" And Descartes said, "Well, maybe I'll have a beer." And so the bartender pours him a beer and hands it to him. And Descartes sits there and he nurses the beer and he sips the beer. And all this time goes by. He's taking forever to drink this one beer. And the bartender's thinking, man, is he ever going to finish this thing? And finally, Descartes takes the last little swig and sets down the glass. The bartender came over and said, "Well, Mr. Descartes, would you like another beer?" And Descartes thought for a second, and he said, "I think not." And poof, he disappeared. Do I hear any laughter? Do I hear confusion? Anybody out there have any of you taken Philosophy 101 or something? If you have, raise your hand. Okay. René Descartes was a famous French philosopher of the 17th century, and his most famous quote is, and of course he was writing in Latin. The quote in Latin says, "Cogito ergo sum," which translate as, "I think, therefore I am." In other words, you have conscious awareness because you think. All right. And so when the bartender says, "Monsieur Descartes, would you like another beer?" and he says, "I think not," and poof, he disappears. Get it? Okay. All right. I'm belaboring the point here. But the point is that joke would probably get some chuckles in a philosophy class. It ain't going to get any chuckles in a general audience. They're going to wonder, what are you talking about? This is about adapting to the audience, whether it's a joke or a story, whatever it may be. So let me consult my notes, see where I am with that. So this is just an example of adapting to your audience. One last story. When I was working at Morehead State University in Kentucky before we moved out here, and I think I've mentioned this, I was in charge of a big building project, and I had to go around all over Kentucky giving presentations about this science center and planetarium we were building. And I like to open with a joke. Can you imagine? So I had a joke about flies, and I told this joke about flies, male and female flies, and oh my God, it went flat. And I learned my lesson. Make sure you know your audience, especially when using jokes. All right, so reading chapter 5. When you read chapter 5, you're going to find that this chapter has a lot of terms in it. Make sure you look at those terms and try to get an idea of what they mean and so on. I will be going through many of the terms in the actual PowerPoint lecture when you watch it. Hopefully you watch this before you watch the other. If you don't, you'll figure it out. So make sure you look at those terms and that you're comfortable with them. It seems like this chapter actually uses more terminology than the other chapters. Anyway, you'll be fine. So how does this chapter, how does this information, the idea of adapting to your audience, actually apply to you? Now, of course, I'm going to give more uh, uh, examples in the PowerPoint lecture. But just let's think about this for a moment. When I first talked about my 3 rules of public speaking, never apologize, never assume, and slow down, I talked about rule number 2 in particular, that you need to know something about your audience. And this chapter talks about that a lot. Who are you talking to? For example, I mentioned that if we were in class with a classroom full of college students, I would also already know something about many of you without ever having to ask a question or say a word to you. First of all, I know you're all in a comm class. Well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? But that's a commonality. You're all taking Comm 101. You're pretty much in the same age range. Now, CSN is a little bit different than what I've taught at other universities where like a freshman class is basically 18 and 19-year-olds. But again, you're still generally within an age range, but a bit broader here than in some other situations. But there you go. That age range indicates to me that you have certain interests. For example, I don't play video games. They don't intrigue me. I like playing games, but not particularly video games. But many of the people I know in the age range from like my grandson to even the mid 30s and so are really into gaming. Okay, so I'm breaking my own rule, but I can assume tiny there, that there may be some interest in things like that. Music, uh, television shows. I may not know the specifics, but I got a general idea in this classroom with you as my students. And of course, my standing joke with that is you're all college students. I know you're all broke. All right. So when I was a college student, I was broke. Have things changed much? Well, that's another discussion. But the point is you can you can kind of figure out your audience just by uh, some basic information. But of course, the chapter goes into a lot more detail on ways of discovering even more information. Let's see, what else do I have here? Okay, the PowerPoint lecture. Uh, of course, you'll watch that, and I will speak specifically to what's in Chapter 5. And then remember, I put these PowerPoints, all of my PowerPoints, into the files. And if you want to just go back and look at the PowerPoint slides without me yapping along with them, you don't have to rewatch the video. You can go to Files on Canvas, click File. It's over on the left-hand side of your screen when you go to the home page. Click File, and it'll list all the PowerPoints and anything else that I might happen to download in there. That's a real nice way to review. You don't have to go through the video again. Sometimes I think it's easier just to go back and look at the slides. So those will be available. Now, once again, and I keep talking about this, I'm not using the quizzes that are available at the end of the chapter, at least not for point value. If you want to use those quizzes as review, that's great. And if you go through and you take the quiz, it's not going to count for you or against you. It's just a nice review method. So that's also available to you. I think that's pretty much all I want to say for the introduction here. After you've watched this, go watch the PowerPoint and you have the chapter available to you. I think the majority of you, from what I can tell, have the online book, which is fine. Some of you have the hard copy book, which personally I think is even better. But make sure you actually read the chapter. Don't just depend on my presentation, because I don't cover everything, or I don't cover everything in detail the way it does in the chapter. So go watch that. And as always, if you have questions, please email me. I think you've noticed, with a few exceptions, I'm pretty fast about getting back to you with questions. So there you go. See you in the next presentation.